Welcome in to episode 336 of the Sources Say podcast, your go-to Kentucky basketball and recruiting podcast on the growing KSR Podcast Network. I am your host, Jack Pilgrim of Kentucky Sports Radio. Very excited to be joined once again by the one and only Sean Smith. Sean, how the heck are you?
I'm fantastic, Jack Pilgrim. Really fantastic, actually. We're into that heart of grassroots basketball, getting a little bit of it now, some time off and things, but a lot of basketball coming and a lot of big decisions to still be made on Kentucky's front.
Yeah, so I spent the weekend in Indianapolis that we talked about on our last show. First live period. We get our first chance to see Mark Pope and his staff rocking Kentucky blue, gripping and grinning, sitting courtside, evaluating up and coming high school talent. And it was really, there was a lot of weird stuff going on, obviously, with Coach Cal being there and seeing them in Arkansas gear and just seeing how they operated versus just kind of watching Mark Pope for the first time. I've never seen him in a live period like this before. I don't know how he recruits. I don't know how he operates, what he looks like, how he interacts with other coaches. None of that. It's a completely brand new experience. So that part was absolutely fascinating to just see what it looked like. Would he kind of look like a fish out of water? Would it be nervous? Would he be, almost overly charismatic? How would he fit in? What would be the dynamic as the new kid on the block wearing the biggest brand in college basketball? And I will say, first and foremost, the way Cal kind of operated back in the day at some of these events, he would usually roll in 4 deep with the head coach, with all 3 of his assistants. A lot of times they would sit 4 deep in a single gym, or kind of go 2 and 2 at different courts across whatever. We show up and it's just Mark Pope and Jason Hart in the first day of EYBL, and you're like, well, that's weird. I get a text from a buddy in Wichita saying Alvin Brooks is over there at the Puma event. And then I also get another text from a buddy down in Bryan, Texas, who says that Cody Feger is down at the 3SSB event. So dividing and conquering, hitting, like, you got to know what you're looking for if you're going to Puma. Alvin Brooks sending your top dog, your shark on the recruiting trail to the most lesser known of the shoe apparel brands. That was a statement in itself. And then watching them interact game by game when they did make their rounds, Feger coming up on Sunday to Indianapolis as Jason Hart and Mark Pope fly down to Bryan, Texas for 3SSB, Alvin Brooks coming on early Saturday afternoon and staying through Sunday, kind of doing one of these numbers, going back and forth with different courts, different gyms and all that. It was just really cool seeing the way they operated for the first time and going after the best of the best in high school basketball, Sean.
Yeah, and you got to have a game plan, and you got to have a game plan to cover all grounds, especially when every major shoe brand and stuff is running their live period and their session at the exact same time. So I know that was probably cool to see firsthand, to see how they kind of navigate this. And like you said, there's so many things that we just don't know about the staff that we knew about the previous staff. And then you see them in that setting and you get to watch them move around the gym. And I was talking to you before we went live that Indy's one of my favorite locations to either to coach at an event or cover an event, because you can kind of see guys from everywhere. They got that spot in the middle of the facility there where coaches will go upstairs and kind of oversee multiple floors if they're wanting to watch multiple guys that are playing. But we know Mark Pope is front and center for these guys and has a good seat somewhere along the baseline there to where he can watch and kind of evaluate his talent, Jack. And this is an important start, because you're evaluating talent that the previous staff was already evaluating. And you're kind of trying to touch up and kind of get in and form your own relationships with those guys that you did not recruit at BYU. So getting off to a good start, making a first impression, having assistant coaches show up, having you show up. It was cool to kind of see and follow how they navigated the opening weekend of the live period.
And I want to say, Pope had a binder this dang big, that just you kind of have to follow these guys around like lost puppy dogs, because you don't know who they're going after. You have to kind of build your recruiting base with them. So you just kind of have to follow them along and see wherever the heck they go, who they're watching. So kind of watching the way Pope is operating and all that, you see his binder. And Sean, it has analytics and charts and data and it's not just names and phone numbers and teams like everybody else's coach's packet that you get when you walk in the front door. It's his own preparation for all the shoe circuits, all of the teams, all of the age groups. And it was a science behind it. They would, one coach would be on one court for a half and the other would be on another, and they would swap at halftime so they could then compare notes after the fact to really dig in and, get second opinions on evaluations and things. And it's just so refreshing because you see so often, including familiar faces who may or may not have been on the Kentucky bench as early as last season, that they use that event as just like a big networking event where you just go and you just shake hands and rub shoulders and, just kind of hang out with your old buddies rather than actually digging into the nuts and bolts of evaluation, and not just using the recruiting rankings, Sean, as your crutch, as your, okay, well, we know Kentucky, with my job before, we could just go to these gyms and it would be 1 through 25. And in order that you could say, okay, well, first I'm going to go to where number 1's playing, then number 2, then number 3, and go interview all those guys. And it'd be easy because you knew that's how they recruited. Now you see them looking at the 163rd player in high school basketball. And you're like, well, where the hell did that come from? It's because these guys actually evaluate their own talent and juggle the AJ DeBontas of the world. They were courtside for every one of his games, but are also going to see the 163rd player in high school basketball as well. That's how you recruit. That's how it should be done, where you can still bring in Kentucky level talent, but also see if you can find some diamonds in the rough, see if you can find your best fits. I really, really like what I saw on that front, Sean, that these guys clearly know how to evaluate talent. They know how to operate. They're kind of developing some early chemistry in the very first live period of the summer. Several more to go. Peach Jam's obviously going to be a huge, huge, huge one, but they're off to a tremendous start, Sean.
Yeah, for sure. And, like I said, preparation's a major part of this. And when you go into a weekend, you kind of want to have a game plan of knowing what you're going to do. And then coming out of that, you want to have another game plan. And all the guys that they look at, even some of these guys that are maybe outside of those rankings numbers that we have gotten used to following this program, they're outside the top 100. When you turn on the tape and you look at their skill set, it fits. It fits some of the pieces that they've had offensively in their program at BYU under Mark Pope. So when you see that, then you kind of know, and that's where you evaluate and you identify. It's not just going and plucking numbers anymore. And I'm not saying that that's what the previous staff was trying to do, but it's not, well, this kid's a top 20 player, we'll figure it out. No, they're going and looking, okay, do you check this box of what we're looking for in our offensive system at Kentucky? Can you do this defensively? What is your ceiling as a player? Are you someone that can come here after a season and be good enough to go to the league? Or are you going to be able to stay here 2 or 3 years and develop into a solid pillar piece of our program? That's the approach that Kentucky's taking now, Jack, that is significantly different than anything that we've seen in recent years at Kentucky. And this is an era of college basketball where if you're just going to pigeonhole yourself into doing it one way, you're probably going to be without a job, or you're going to be bouncing around and going somewhere else. There's so many different avenues now to building rosters that I feel like you have to touch them all, or at least the highest percentage that you can get to. The higher that number is, I think the more stability and continuity you can build within your program to kind of have success and then build on it moving forward year after year. It seems to be that's the approach that Kentucky's taking and trying to move forward with.
And these kids are so receptive of it. I'll be honest, like that Memphis trip for that EYBL session 1, these kids were like just not caring about Kentucky whatsoever under Pope. They were like, well, all I know is John Calipari is going to be a whole brand new recruiting process on their end. I'm in a wait and see holding pattern until I have my first conversation. Now, the guys that have heard from Pope are like, dude, I freaking love this guy. Like, there's this kid, Tunde Yesufu, who is one of the rising stars in high school basketball, class of 2025, top 20 recruit that will end up being a 5-star, one of the best in high school basketball when the final rankings come out, when the time comes. This is a kid that said, I talked to Mark Pope. I came to the United States with Kentucky as my dream school. Like, when I fell in love with basketball, Kentucky was what I had in my mind of where I wanted to go. And yeah, Coach Cal left, but Mark Pope kind of slid right in, been FaceTiming me, calling me, sitting courtside for my games. And he was like, I love his energy. That's a coach that I would love to play for. I would really, I'm looking forward to visiting. The excitement that we feel as fans, and it's kind of spreading across the Commonwealth quickly after the press conference. It was a little slow initially with these high school kids, but the reception is very clearly there. That I didn't have one single interaction with a kid where you just did not get the vibe that they were not feeling Kentucky. And like, you could very clearly feel that in Memphis. I think Kentucky is going to be a bigger player for the top tier 5 stars. It's one thing when Mark Pope takes a job and says, we're still going to recruit Burger Boys. We're still going to recruit the best of the best, the top 10, blah, 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 because that's what the fans want to hear. They want to hear that you're still recruiting to Kentucky, but it's different to actually get in the door with these kids and crack that door open and get a commitment from one of them. And the way these kids are talking about this program under Mark Pope, I'm feeling infinitely more positive and optimistic moving forward about Pope's ability to land these kids, because he's already off to one heck of a start.
And you mentioned in the opening of this kind of how different it was to see John Calipari in Arkansas colors and Arkansas logos and everybody sitting there on the baseline. But, I saw Orlando Antigua. He was over at Under Armour and was there on the baseline where we were playing. So it's weird to kind of see those things, even though he'd already been at Illinois. But it's one of those things, Jack, that the first initial time that you see this out there, it's weird, but then everybody kind of moves on and it quickly becomes a normal thing. And as this live period continues and they get into the next one, it's not going to be as awkward to see John Calipari sitting there for Arkansas. And now Mark Pope is the face of Kentucky basketball, and this staff is the face of what they're doing and building rosters. So it's cool to see how they're building relationships, because I'm not sure there was a staff in the country that was kind of challenged more than Kentucky, given that you come into a blue blood program and you basically start all over. The only thing that is familiar to you is that you played there and you won a national championship there, and you know the fans and you know people that have been teammates with you and over the years. Outside of that, there was nothing left. So besides the building that you played in as a player. So having to do all this at once and not really have a head start on any of it, it's been super impressive to follow. Putting your staff together, putting this roster together, hitting the transfer portal, delegating like roles to staff members, and kind of saying, okay, and then the figure bombs and all this stuff. Like, it's all kind of happened it's so quickly come together that it's already starting to feel like the norm of Kentucky basketball in just a short 4 to 5 week period. But seeing them do this and now building relationships on the grassroots side of this and in high school, that was the piece that we were kind of intrigued with following. How were they going to pursue this? And I think they've got a solid game plan. And I think you're starting to see it unfold.
Yeah, so that will be in a holding pattern continuing. I think there's another live period this weekend in Kansas City, then Peach Jam throughout the summer. Momentum back on the current roster and kind of addressing the elephant in the room. There are 2 spots left, 11 right now, 13 total, 2 more to go. And all eyes are on Chaz Lanier of North Florida and Jaxson Robinson of BYU. The former obviously making a decision very, very shortly in the coming days, starts his visit trip to BYU on Sunday, then heads to Lexington for a 1-day trip to Kentucky, then is closing out at Tennessee today, right now, wrapping up there. And then we'll go into decision mode, 99.9% coming back, not keeping his name in the draft, pulling his name out to return to high major basketball. Wherever he lands is getting one of the most electric scorers in high school basketball. Then on the other end, you have Jaxson Robinson, who is, the guy that kind of blossomed in the best version of Mark Pope. Kind of Mark Pope, the one star. It's not a star-driven system and program, but he kind of emerged as the Big 12 6-man of the year, a guy who clearly is in the draft conversation in the 40s, depending on how that unfolds. He has until May 29th to pull his name out, but it is neck and neck. Kentucky is right there in the mix of it for both of those guys. Having some follow-up conversations about just kind of what the plan is for Kentucky. The expectation is that they land one of them. They would take both. Obviously, you don't pass up on that opportunity. That's why you kind of have that floating 13th spot available. But the expectation internally is we're gonna land one of those two guys. Obviously, priority number one is Chaz Lanier because he's first on the docket. He's ready to make a decision sooner rather than later. While Jaxson Robinson, you still have several days left. Your thoughts right now before we get into some of the visit specifics and all that. Where are you leaning on in terms of what you want to see Mark Pope do, what direction you want him to go with? If you had your choice between the two, how would you move forward if you were Pope?
I like both pieces a lot. And, we talked about them last week and how they what they add to the game and what they do. And when you're talking about Chaz, a huge breakout year this past year. But if you're asking me what I would take, there's a number of reasons why I would take Jaxson Robinson. It's the familiarity with Mark Pope. It's the doing it in a major conference. And I still think that when it comes to upside, I still think there's a lot left to his game that he can continue to carry on. Where Chaz, to me, one really good year. Is it going to be hard to duplicate that at a place like Kentucky? I don't know. But if you're asking me of the two, if I preferred one, it would be Jaxson Robinson. And I think the experience of being with Mark Pope and being in that system offensively, I think already kind of takes you to the next level. And then doing it against the competition and the names that he was doing that against, I think is another dividing factor for me. But if that doesn't happen and you go the other direction, I don't think you necessarily go wrong with either name. And I think Kentucky fans should celebrate both, whichever one it is, because I think both are very good pieces that can help this program and help them win immediately.
Yeah, and I lean the same way. I think Jaxson Robinson is a perfect fit for Mark Pope. Again, this isn't a star-driven offense where you're asking for a guy to just go hunt buckets himself. It's going to play within the system, but like we talked about on the last show, you want the guy who is going to play within the system but just make shots at a higher rate, who is going to be the better athlete of a bunch of good athletes who want to have the best athlete. That's why they're going all in on one of these two guys to kind of raise the ceiling of this group, where you do have a guy who can knock down, catch, and shoot threes at the highest rate imaginable in high school, in college basketball, and Chaz Lanier in the 96th percentile in that rate. You have Kobe Brea, who is just like a hair better in that realm, but two of the top 5 shooters in high school basketball. You have a chance of locking both up to kind of build your offense around and just kind of build the system around them. That's what you're looking for. You want guys who are going to play within your system and be stars of the system. You're not saying that this guy is going to go in ISO at the end of the shot clock and win you games that way. They're just going to produce at a higher level within the offense compared to some of these other guys that you could be getting lower, among lower priorities. So I would love both. 6'4" Chaz Lanier. I like the size of Jaxson. He measured in a little bit short at the combine, but I love the athleticism of Jaxson. I love the length. His wingspan at 6'11.75 is among the best. I think he has really impressive defensive upside. If you can kind of engage that and unlock it, I think having better defensive talent around you in Otega Oweh, Lamont Butler, I think is going to kind of unlock a better defensive version of him as well. You really can't go wrong. Are you taking size and length and experience under Mark Pope, or are you taking one of the hottest shooters in college basketball, while kind of knowing it's a little bit of a gamble where he came from at North Florida? The competition's a little bit low, but he performed relatively well against Power 5 competition. So it's just kind of a pick your poison. They both have their own pros and cons, but there's just a ton to love about both of them. And it's just kind of a waiting game. Go for it.
Well, the one thing I was going to add about Jaxson Robinson to me is he's a he's played a role. Like, he's already stayed within a role at BYU where it wasn't all starts. Like, I mean, as his first year there, 30 starts, 33 games played. This last year, 6 starts and 33 games played. He's worked with Mark Pope. He's played for Mark Pope. Like, understanding what you're getting and knowing what you're getting, to me, about a final piece, it's a pretty important starting point when you bring somebody into your program. Not saying that if they go with Chaz that it's not something that's not going to work, because I think it will if you somehow can land both. But then again, numbers and stuff, it starts to get really clunky, and then kind of figuring out where people fall. But I just think that when you look at those factors for Jaxson Robinson, that one makes a ton of sense for everyone. But does it come down to a decision being made before that one? And then this deadline of the NBA draft, May 29th. Like, even though things are significantly different in Lexington, they kind of some all feel the same too, because we're in that same familiar pattern and point where we're waiting on something to happen. But the difference is no one's here in doing it. It's another guy that's waiting to take his name out of the draft, and then you're kind of waiting to see if you get one of the last coveted pieces from the portal here, or a couple. So it's going to be interesting to follow. Is it order here, though? Is it someone who's already been on campus? Like, does that kind of play into this? We know about Tennessee and things, so we'll just see how this all plays out. But I prefer Jaxson Robinson for all those things. Not saying Chaz cannot be successful in this program. I just think that Jaxson, knowing what you're getting, we talked about philosophy with what Mark Pope is doing in the transfer portal. It's going after guys that he's seen with his own 2 eyes. This is not just one that he's seen with his own 2 eyes. This is a guy that has been in front of him every single day. And I think that would be a really good, not starting piece, because it'd be the final piece, but it would be the one that you can kind of center a lot of this stuff around.
And checking in right before the show started, just to try to have the absolute latest information out there. Kentucky still does not know what the answer is. They did not get a silent commitment. None of that. You hear the same stuff after every single visit. Well, the pitch was great. The kid was attentive. The people he was with, they were all engaged in hearing our pitch, seemed very, very, very interested. But you kind of get that vibe with you can count on one hand how many bad visits that you've seen, but it's just about, okay, which one was just a hair better, and all that. The NIL pitch is there. It's competitive. They know exactly what they're dealing with. Having conversations with people at EYBL this past weekend that tried recruiting Chaz Lanier, they couldn't even get into the conversation because it was a 7-figure conversation to even get in, to begin with, to start the conversation. So I think a lot of the NIL talk publicly and, different message boards and Discord and things about these wide gaps with NIL dollars compared, with BYU, Tennessee, Kentucky. This was you have to get into the race to begin with. So barring a $4 million offer from BYU or Tennessee or whatever, we're all talking, relatively similar money. There's some talk that BYU just had this substantially bigger offer than Kentucky and Tennessee, and that's why it was. I don't think that's the case. I know Kentucky has the money. They have kind of set aside some of this money for their final go-to home swing for the fences piece. So I know they have it. I know it's being talked about in these conversations, and it just comes down to, do you trust the NBA pitch that BYU is throwing out there? That you're getting a guy that has coached the best of the best in the world at the NBA level. Do you trust his ability to put you in the NBA coming from North Florida? That's a take. Dalton Connect is the Tennessee pitch on their end, saying, hey, we just took a mid-major talent, turned him into a lottery pick. What more do you need to see? You're from Tennessee, talking to people around Chaz Lanier that have grown up with him, say that the whole in-state thing, the Tennessee love, is just way blown out of proportion, considering he's from Nashville, and knowing the state as well as anybody, Sean, in that area, Knoxville to Nashville is just as far away as Nashville to Lexington is. So I'm really not buying that side of things either, that he's just has this homegrown attachment to Tennessee. That's not the case. So Kentucky doesn't know where things stand. They feel really, really good about where the pitch was, but you talk to people around BYU, they felt really good about it too. In Tennessee, they were the ones that lured him out of the portal to begin with. What was interesting to me, though, Sean, at talking to the different coaches at EYBL in Indianapolis this past weekend, there were people that were kind of relaying the message, talking to Tennessee side, saying they're kind of discounting whether Chaz is even worth it. Like almost like, you're not going to land him. So you're starting to kind of get the spin out ahead that, well, this kid his asking price was just way too much. He's not worth it. Didn't defend at a high level at a really, really bad ASUN team. We don't think his game's going to translate the same way as Dalton Knecht. Some of those kind of spin zone things were already starting to leak out, but then the visit gets scheduled and you're starting to see some, we're building back momentum. So there's just so many uncertainties. It's always so fluid with recruitments. All I know is on Kentucky side, they felt excellent about where things stood coming out of the visit, but they didn't have anything tangible that said, we got them locked up, it's a done deal. They're just kind of playing the waiting game with the rest of us to see how things wrap up in Tennessee before moving forward.
And the one thing I'll add about, Dalton Knecht is Dalton Knecht was a top 10, top 5 caliber player before he ever stepped foot on campus at Tennessee. Tennessee just kind of gave him the platform to showcase it this season. Because I was at practice number 3 of the fall, and I left there and I told you exactly what we all saw throughout the season. I said,
you said it, you nailed it.
I said, this dude's a problem, and he's going to be the best player in the league, and he has potential to be a top 5, top 10 NBA draft pick. I said, that dude's legit. Did Tennessee develop him into that? Probably no. His game was there, but it gave him the platform. Now, did he get better? Yes. But he was already at that point, to me, talent-wise. Now it's it's more polished, and you're going into the league, doing what you did this season. But it's going to be interesting to kind of follow here. But to me, I'll keep going back to a couple of things here. We keep talking about, does Kentucky have a dude or not on this roster? When I'm breaking down these two guys, and like I said, whichever way they decide to go, I'm going to lean all the way into it and trust that it's going to work out, because I think they're 2 talented players, 2 talented scorers that are going to put up points. To me, Jaxson Robinson has done it in a big game atmosphere. He's done it in the NCAA tournament, and he's done it in the Big 12 and on the road at Kansas and all these places. Those stops that you maybe – I don't want to say that it's an unfair way to kind of critique people's games, because like I said about Dalton Knecht, he just needed the platform. But knowing that they've done it on that level is some security in going after and landing that guy. But it's even more so that you were the head coach that were coaching him multiple years doing it too. So if that's the way the dominoes fall here in a week or so, then I think it falls in a good direction. If not, and you get Chaz before that, I still think it's a good direction that it falls. I don't think Kentucky can go wrong with either one. It's just I would trust the other one maybe having more and working out more, maybe just because I'm going off of what I've seen and what I know.
Yeah, and it's just depends on what you're looking for. Chaz Lanier is going to have an infinite amount of wide open catch and shoot opportunities under Mark Pope. He's going to make those shots because he made those shots this past season. So you kind of know what you're going to get with both of them. Jaxson Robinson, because we have seen it under Mark Pope with the system. We know that one works in the Big 12, tied the SEC for NCAA tournament bids this past season with 8. Like, that is going to work. That is the proven safe commodity. And I know it's a little bit more of a gamble because, again, the release point's a little bit different for Chaz, and how is that going to translate to the SEC? But he did play really well in Power 5 competition this past year, Sean, which makes me feel a little bit better about it. And when you look at just in a vacuum, you look at his catch and shoot numbers on wide open looks at North Florida, he graded out just on a different planet. And that's what I talked about a couple of weeks ago, talking to NBA scouts that were like evaluating him, saying, this guy, the numbers are just like, if you look at the in-depth, the NBA's scouting data that they have and that they use, they're like, he's on a different planet in terms of catch and shoot, wide open look, NBA 3-level shots. We just don't trust that the sample size is so small. He has shown none of that up to this point, and then he just explodes into outer space. So talking to people around Chaz, and I asked that question. Well, how do you pitch to Kentucky fans that he isn't just a one-hit wonder? How can you kind of sell him as I trust that he's going to be able to do this at the SEC level? It's, well, look, he was a slow burn to get to where he is right now. It took a minute, but he also didn't take any shortcuts. He didn't hit the portal when he didn't get his early opportunities at North Florida and try to kind of zigzag his way up. He was patient, just kind of carved out his own individual role on his own time, and then kind of got the reward from that patience. So that's their argument is, well, he already kind of did all the hard work for himself by being patient and waiting until his senior year to finally explode. You just kind of got to trust him that he's going to be able to have that same mindset to do it. And he's really not going to be doing that much different in Lexington that he did down at North Florida either. I mean, just the numbers are just ridiculous. 44% on 7.5 attempts per game. That's fifth nationally, eighth in total makes per game. 90th percentile as a spot up shooter. 96th percentile in catch and shoot threes, 67 effective field goal percentage, 1.26 points per possession on dribble handoffs, 90th percentile, 1.27 points per possession in isolation. So he's also a guy who can go, if stuff breaks down, can go get you a bucket too. There is a lot to like about both of these guys. I mean, I love Jaxson Robinson. I prefer him. But man, if you land Chaz Lanier, I mean, I will never complain about that. And it's going to be a really, really complete roster if you're able to do it.
Yeah, and what I was looking at there is I was going through and kind of trying to see the Power 5 matchups or the Power Conference opponents that he did play against. Now, while those numbers are not as good as the conference numbers, they're still solid. The worst game, though, was against LSU. In 26 minutes, he had 7 points, and he was 2 of 8 from the field. But there's a 3-game stretch against Florida State, Georgia, and Miami where he scores 22, 16, and 12. But in that stretch, he knocked down 13 threes in that 4-game stretch. So, obviously, I mean, he can put up points. When you put him with better players and better talent at Kentucky, it's not like you're asking someone to come in here and have to do the same thing at North Florida that he's going to have to do at Kentucky. Like, it's not the same. He's going to be with better players. He's going to be in a system where he can make shots. You mentioned there's going to be standstill, wide open 3-point attempts in this offense, especially if you can get some of these guys that Mark Pope has brought in to touch the paint and get some of those shoulders and stuff in the paint, 2 feet in the paint. You got guys that can space it out on this roster. Kobe Brea, like the list goes on and on with shot makers. I think he would have success here. Not a whole lot of concern when I look at the numbers and stuff there. The only thing that you maybe look at is none of those games were competitive. So none of them were within like a 6, 7, 8, 9-point game. A lot of them were blowouts. So to me, there's numbers in competition, and then there's numbers in blowout scores that you're losing by 25 or 30, because how much is the guy in front of you really caring about guarding? But the consistency's there over the course of a full year that he put up big numbers. He made shots, high volume shot opportunities too. That volume will not be the same in Lexington. Is he more efficient though? I don't know. Like there's some efficient guys on this roster that were super efficient that aren't going to have the same volume. That makes me wonder if they could be even more efficient at Kentucky.
So let's just, for the sake of argument, say Chaz opts against Kentucky, decides to choose BYU or Tennessee. Talking to people and coaches that know Jaxson, have been around Jaxson, that been familiar with the draft process. Before the event, had a lot of conversations about, with people about just how Jaxson operates, his time at BYU, their relationship with, his relationship with Mark Pope. And it is total genuine consensus that if Jaxson Robinson pulls his name out of the draft and Chaz Lanier is not a Kentucky Wildcat, that Jaxson Robinson will be. Like, you don't want to say that Pope is going to pull Jaxson out of the draft, because that's not the case. They have an unbelievably tight relationship. So much mutual respect there. And they're both doing their own things. They understand if Jaxson feels it's time for him to take his talents to the NBA, it will be a positive recruiting spin for them moving forward to say that we got a guy that was basically a non-factor in the SEC and turned him into Big 12 6-man of the year and turned him into a draft pick. That is a huge recruiting tool for them. So they're kind of okay with no matter how this unfolds, assuming they're able to still get one of them. But I think that's why there's just kind of a sense of peace with all of this on Kentucky's side, that even if Chaz, they pushed all their chips in on Chaz, said, let's make this happen. If you want to come, we obviously want you. But if not, there is this mutual level of respect where the sense that I have gotten with Jaxson Robinson is he is okay with either scenario of pursuing my dreams right now or helping Mark Pope win a national championship at Kentucky. I think he is totally okay with both. And if Chaz decides to go elsewhere, that there is kind of I can go help make excellent NIL money at Kentucky. That's already been discussed. Those T's have been crossed and I's have been dotted. Like, things are good there. I can go and help Mark Pope win a national championship at Kentucky in my last go at it, using the spotlight to catapult myself further into the draft, higher potentially. That'd be the goal. So I think that they're kind of in a win-win situation where Jaxson is the fallback option. There is a mutual understanding that if they aren't able to land Chaz, that they're in an excellent spot. BYU's trying to bring Jaxson back. They want to get at least one star to close out their class for their roster. Kansas is the only other threat, and that's only if they have a bag to throw at him. Again, I don't know if they'll have it. Talking to other recruits and their families that have already signed with Kansas, money's kind of getting thin over there too. So I think Kentucky's in a really, really good spot no matter what happens with Chaz, because I think that you will have Jaxson as a fallback option.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask you next was how much of this too, if you don't get Chaz and you're Jaxson, you see the opportunity to kind of walk in, you got 1 year left here. Do you want to go out and do it under someone that you don't have any type of relationship with, you don't have that trust built with, or do you want to go do it at a blue blood program under a coach that has taken your game from here to here to the point that you've even been able to put your name in the NBA draft and possibly pursue a professional career? So knowing as much as what we know about it from that vantage point, that's probably the path that you trust the most. And when you just have one final shot at it, you probably want to go with something you trust. Same thing here if it falls into Kentucky's lap, and that's what they play with. Here is Jaxson Robinson and him coming to Kentucky. You can say the same thing for Mark Pope. That final piece is someone you trust. Now, the one thing about Chaz, we're talking about all these guys that Kentucky targets. There's one common denominator between them all. They all fit the system. There are no, we'll make it fit and we'll wiggle it in here and try to fit you in. No, if you don't fit what Kentucky's doing, you're not on Kentucky's board. That is the one thing that you can say about this staff and Mark Pope. Even now, the one thing that's different, Jack, about all these pieces that Kentucky's targeting and moving forward with, they're on a different level, maybe talent-wise, when it comes to are you a one and done? Are you a 2-year player, multi-year player? Or are you someone that can kind of grow within your program and stay 3 or 4 years? The one common denominator, though, is the skill set and how you fit and what Kentucky's want to do. Both of these guys fit. So regardless of which way Kentucky goes, you feel good about it. But it is kind of good insurance to know that if you don't get Chaz, you know you got a guy that possibly can remove his name here very soon that has already played for your head coach and been very successful doing it, that you can kind of fall back on. And it's not like it's a consolation prize. Like either way Kentucky goes, you're winning, in my opinion.
And like people that have coached Jaxson before at previous stops before he even landed at BYU are like, what Mark Pope has done with Jaxson, he ain't going anywhere else if there's a need there. Like, is there a path where a team promises him a late first-round pick or something ridiculous in these next couple of days? I don't buy that. I don't think that's going to happen. But he is prioritizing the NBA draft first and has kind of put himself in that conversation of late 30s, early 40s, in that realm, in that conversation, if there is a promise made or something, there, is there a path to where Jaxson goes elsewhere or Chaz goes elsewhere and Jaxson feels he has to, has gotten a promise that he can't pass up? Like, Pope's okay with that. Like, there's an understanding, like, is there a path for them to miss out on both? Technically, but there is no scenario where Jaxson screws over Pope by going to Kansas while Chaz goes elsewhere. Like, there is no scenario for that to happen, and I think that's a comfortable spot to be in, and you just kind of have to play that as it lies. And in that case, you have a Darren Peterson reclass on the table. You have a Will Riley potential reclass on the table. You have different avenues. Woogle Poplar, that he's still available. Just going down the list, it's not like you are totally screwed. And again, the roster is good as is. You just need a little bit more oomph to kind of take you to that next level. You can find that elsewhere, but there are a lot of people in the college basketball world that don't think that this is going to go past Jaxson Robinson, because there's just such an endless amount of mutual respect and love between those two and what they have done for each other's careers. And I think that with so much talk about the other schools involved with Jaxson, people are not realizing just what those two have meant to one another in their respective careers, that I would be absolutely blown away. Other coaches, rival coaches, people that have coached him in the past would be absolutely floored if Jaxson Robinson is anywhere but Kentucky, if Chaz Lanier goes elsewhere and the draft opportunity doesn't go there. So I think that's a really good position to be in if you are Mark Pope, as you navigate the next 8 days leading up to the withdrawal deadline, I think, Sean.
Yeah, for sure. And there's people in the chat. I saw a couple people asking, like, why does one kind of cancel out the other, and why can't you take both? Well, from a numbers standpoint, yeah, you can. But at the same time here, there are so many new faces, and all these roles have to kind of be developed over the course of the next few months. And as we kind of go down and get towards the fall here, there's so many moving parts that we don't really know where any of this is going to fall, Jack. And I think that when it comes down to it, even though somebody may not play the same position, it comes down to a numbers game here, that there's only so many minutes available. And whatever lineup combinations you throw out there, there's so many shots available. We're talking about guys at the end of their career here that are trying to better themselves and put themselves in position to become a professional basketball player. Top line number one would be the NBA level, and then on down from there. That's why these decisions are tougher to make for someone than maybe it is for a guy that's still got 2 to 3 years of eligibility and looking long term. That's probably where it cancels itself out more than maybe they don't play the same position. Is I've got to put myself in position here with 1 year of eligibility left to get myself into professional basketball career. It's maybe not as much about how much NIL money can I get now, because yes, that's a great starting point. It's about what do I do the 5 years beyond what I do for this one, and what is the best opportunity for me right now to play and finish out college basketball. I still believe that whichever way Kentucky goes with this, you get it. The one scenario we don't want to discuss is if they somehow don't get either one of these guys, then where does Kentucky go?
Yeah, and I think they have some contingency plans there, and they're already in a good spot. They feel really good about the pieces they have right now. They would just like one more little oomph. Talking a little bit about positions and the difference between those two, I want to get your thoughts on this. I don't think it's so much as what their positions are, shooting guard versus small forward, but rather what their roles are going to be. I think the roles would be equal for both of them. Like, I think that, are they complementary enough? Like, I had heard that there is still an avenue to where if you get Chaz to commit and by next week Jackson's just like, man, I'm not really feeling I just want to go back to college, that would be a scenario where Kansas could, potentially just say, all right, well, let's just throw some money out at, I've heard that they don't have it, but maybe they put something together at the last minute or whatever. But that's the only scenario that I think Kentucky is anticipating him playing elsewhere if he withdraws, is if they already have Chaz. But if he pulls his name out and says, I'm not doing this for the money, like I think I'll make enough at Kentucky, my brand will grow, and this is about me just catapulting myself with a bigger spotlight into, maybe late first round next season, or the early 30s rather than like the early 40s or whatever that you get this year. So is there a path for both of them to do? Kentucky's not expecting it, but it's not something that they would pass up. How do you see those roles differ or positions differ between those two, knowing that one is a 6'5"? Oh, Chaz came in at 6'4" in the combine with, or like 6'3.75 and without shoes, and Jaxson was like 6'4.75 without shoes, like 6'6" probably with. Do you see the roles that much different? Do you see the positions that much different, or do you see them both as just this guy is going to be our, what a lot of our stuff is going to be kind of built around?
And that's where, if I'm going to talk so much about the system and how strong the system is, then it's not necessarily as much about kind of who's in it, is more so about what's the skill set of the pieces that are in it. And they both do things that this system needs, and this system can put you in position to have a ton of success in. So no, I don't really think that it's as much about the 2 or the 3 or the body and how big this guy is, because I've seen Mark Pope do some things over the years where they take advantage of what the defense has given you. If you want to do this and you get a switch, they're going to post it, or they're going to flatten it out. They're going to drive you and take you off the bounce. Like, they're going to take advantage of whatever comes from the defensive situation and in a game, where if you can make shots and you can score the basketball, you can space the floor, and you can do those things, you can play in this system and you can have success in it. And both of those guys can do that and have done that. Are these two, maybe we're getting too caught up in does Kentucky have a dude that maybe we're thinking this is going to be the dude? I'm still not leaning all in that this is going to be Kentucky's best player from either one of them. And I don't think it necessarily has to be. Like, this edition, to me, it's not about this is Kentucky's guy. This is the guy that everything goes through, because I don't think that's going to be the case. I think this system is going to be so balanced that the biggest question about not getting either or not getting both of them would be just volume. Because shots got to go to Kobe Bryant. Like, shots got to go to all these other guys on this roster. You're going to have to.
Kentucky's really high on Andrew Carr too. Like,
yeah, and
unbelievably high on Andrew Carr.
And that's what I'm saying. Whether you're 6'10" or you're 6'3", the skill sets and the things that you can do. Can you pass the basketball? Can you shoot it? Do you have guys that can put it on the deck and get in the paint, like an Otega Owe, like a Lamont Butler, like those guys that can get downhill and put this offense in situations and scenarios to kind of create advantages and disadvantages for defenses? You got to have all those things, and that's the mix. That's why I'm not ready to pigeonhole and say, well, this guy's going to be Kentucky's best player just because he's the reigning Big 12 six man of the year. Could he be a very, very good player here? Yes, but could a Carr or someone else kind of move forward and be even better? Possibly. Like, what happens with Colin Chandler? Like, there's so many pieces here in this program, Jack, that are new faces that I don't want to just circle and say that's going to be Kentucky's dude, because we don't know what this system or who the system is going to produce. Like, who's the Jaxson Robinson of this system as it stands? Like, who's that guy that takes the next step in their career that it's not Jaxson Robinson? Like, who is that guy? Like, this system's going to create it, and this system's going to put you in spots to be successful as long as you can do those 2 or 3 things that can get you on the floor. To me, the deciding factor for a lot of this is going to be how these guys defend. Do you defend at a level that can keep you on the floor? That's going to be the dividing side of this to who Mark Pope leans toward, because in the SEC and to do it at Kentucky, you're going to have to defend at a clip higher than they defended at BYU.
Yeah, and that's why I love that they've built the core that they have, to where talking to people around the program and that have been involved with this, they're ecstatic about just the core group, where they do kind of have a little bit of, a pep in their step to say, you know what, let's throw some money around. Let's kind of push some chips in on one last guy just to take this thing to a whole new level. They could roll out the roster today and feel that they have a competitor out there, which is a great spot to be in. Like, I feel more comfortable knowing kind of the workings and how they got to this roster and some of the guys they added and the confidence in all of them individually coming together as a unit, I feel a lot better about the trajectory of this, knowing that now, and just kind of saying, you know what, let's see what happens. Let's go get Chaz. Let's go get a Jaxson. If those things don't unfold, and I don't think they will, then what about a Will Riley? What about a Darren Peterson? What about just international star that presents itself in a couple months? Like, they have kind of opened up the door to being flexible because they're playing with house money up to this point. So I love the foundation. I am personally rooting for, I just want either of them. I don't care who it is. I prefer Jaxson. I would take Chaz right now. If he commits right now, I'd be just absolutely over the moon. But we'll see. We'll see how that goes. Real quickly, Sean, the Source Say podcast is brought to you by Andy Ludicky and MyPerfectFranchise.net. Andy is a franchise consultant as well as franchise owner and helps people find franchises that fit their skill sets, financial requirements, time to commit, and more. His services are 100% free, and he is here to help. If you have any questions about business ownership, you can learn more and contact Andy anytime at www.myperfectfranchise.net. How about if Kentucky is able to land one of Chaz or Jaxson and the other doesn't decide to follow and form a super team in Lexington, Sean? Jamie Vincent, the Oak Hill 3-star top 200 prospect in high school basketball right now, one of the top uncommitted prospects in the 2024 class. What do you think of the vision there for Pope to kind of bring him in as a potential long-term option, potential redshirt option as that 13th spot? Would you rather keep that as like a floating piece that you kind of hold on to, that you keep that scholarship, or would you prefer that it ends up, being taken by Jamie Vincent right now?
Listen, I watched Jamie Vincent's tape today, and when I turn it on and I look at it, I see a lot of the things that you're looking for. And this is where I keep coming back to Mark Pope's system and the things that you have to do to play in the system. From one, if you're going to play the 4 and the 5, you've got to be able to step out and be a threat to shoot it. And I saw that on tape. I saw a 6'10", 6'11" body that can stand there and knock and take down shot or take shots and knock them down. So I also saw a great defender blocking shots out of help side Jack. And that was very appealing to me, a guy that runs the floor well and does those things. This is the stuff that I was talking about over the last few weeks. And there you are. I see you now. I was talking to Andy there. Gotta love Andy. I'll tell him all about whatever we need to know here about Kentucky basketball. But no, this kind of falls into what I said over the last couple of weeks, that you're at this changing, and it's changing of the guard of what you're wanting to do in this program. How you construct your rosters, how you build it. Kyle Tucker wrote a piece that was published today that talked about the layout of what the philosophy and stuff is for Kentucky basketball. And there's so many different things that you can do now with a fresh start. I think Mark Pope is built, and this program is built now to kind of touch all those areas in recruiting. I said it last week, and I said I think on the week before that, you can recruit elite level high school talent. You can recruit the transfer portal at an elite level. You can even touch the transfer portal and get developmental pieces, guys that you look at and say, okay, can they be really, really good for us in year one and outperform expectations? Yes. And if they do, great. But if not, we see the upside to work with them for a couple of years and then turn them into what they want. We can go get the Trent Noahs and the Travis Perrys. I know those are in-state kids, but there's those guys out there too in neighboring states, Jack, that you can maybe kind of target that can fill similar roles too if the in-state recruiting is not strong in a year. So I'm okay with it. If that's what Kentucky wants to do with that last spot and they see value in adding a 6'11" frame that can block shots but also can step out and take shots, yeah, you take it and you work with it. Plus, he's played in a program that just continues to churn out winners and guys that have success not only at this level but at the NBA as well. So being in that situation, you see Oak Hill popping up and stuff on highlights, like that's also another thing that you can kind of lean in and trust as well when you take a guy.
Yeah, it's it's interesting. Some people in the recruiting world were shocked because he was kind of barely a take at Vanderbilt, and some of the competition that Kentucky has for him is pretty underwhelming. It's kind of the same conversation that we had about Ainsley but last week when he decided to come here from Fairleigh Dickinson, and Siena was the top competition. There were some fans and like, why are we beating out Siena for recruits? Rutgers is the top competition for Jamie Vincent right now. I personally would like to, and I don't think it's totally fair for Jamie, and I totally get it because while we're talking about it, I'll talk, knowing a little bit about what the pitch is for Jamie. I think it makes more sense for Kentucky side. I don't know if it makes sense for Jamie's side. It's my understanding it'd be a redshirt plan for him where he would not play this year, 5-year path, basically saying you're not a year away from being a year away yet. We'll talk to you later. We'll develop the heck out of you. Let's get you in the strength and conditioning program. Let's get you where you need to be. But you're the project. Like, you are a guy. And is there even room for project bigs in the portal era anymore, Sean? Like, that's something that, we haven't really talked about. What happens if you develop this kid and then he gets impatient and wants to go somewhere else, and somebody else gets to take advantage of the development that you put into it? Why use that scholarship to do the hard work for some other coach when you could get a reclass guy right now, or you could wait for an international prospect to present itself down the road, whatever the other option would be by leaving that open? That's the only counter argument to that does a project big even exist in today's basketball world?
And here's where I would lean into this. So if you were to take a reclass, is that reclass going to be better than any of the options you have right now starting at that spot that's going to eat up minutes? If so, yeah, you go take that guy, because then they're passing somebody up. But if not, I'm okay with the project big, and here's why. That's a really good question. Can it be something that works in today's portal, in today's college basketball climate? We don't really know, especially under Mark Pope and the staff at Kentucky. So I'm willing to kind of turn over every rock and look under it and see what you can kind of find. And there are guys that slip through the cracks when it comes to names and these programs that are being recruited, and they're not getting the major blue blood programs after them. Those guys are popping up in the portal right now all over the place and then go on to have success at a high major program. Could this be a guy that slips through the cracks a little bit and then develops into somebody that can be a piece of your program in year 3, year 4? To me, if you're honest up front and that conversation is communicated and those expectations are communicated, it doesn't mean you can't outperform those expectations. But if both sides are in agreement and that's the plan coming in, I think it's a win-win. And if you lose them, I'm willing to take the risk on guy number 13 possibly turning out in 3 or 4 years and being guy number 5, 6, 7 in your program, more so than having to do it all through the portal every single year, because this is where I'm a fan of using the scholarship. Don't just sit and hold it unless you go get a guy that's better than the 2 or 3 rotation pieces you already have. If you know that, then you go and do it. If not, I'm okay with kind of taking a developmental piece, because if he does leave, guess what? You just go out and find it again and fill it in the portal. Like, that's the way that this kind of this thing works now on the playing field that we're on.
I have an interesting hypothetical to throw your way, in just the general college basketball landscape right now. How feasible would it be? And again, I don't know if it's fair to the kid. I totally understand if he doesn't think it is and wants to go somewhere where he plays, wants to go somewhere where he's maybe on a 2-year plan versus a true 5-year plan that Kentucky is potentially offering him. And I've heard some mixed things that he knows that he's a little bit of a project, maybe not going to play right away, but like, at least give me a shot next year or even the year after that. 5 years is a whole heck of a long time. But say that he is interested in this path. What do you think of the possibility of turning him into an NIL walk-on, where the tuition, the books, the room, the board, it's all paid for with NIL deals, with an understanding that you're going to have to pay your way, but you're going to make more, above and beyond what it will cost you anyway, and we'll help you out by maneuvering a couple extra deals or whatever the case is to kind of get him to agree to this, to still keep that floating 13th spot open. Is that feasible? Is that even fair to ask a kid in today's climate of college basketball? I think it's a great idea. I would personally do it. Having a 3-star top 200 walk-on your team as Brennan Canada's replacement is freaking next level, chess versus checkers in college basketball. I just don't know if it's a pitch that the kid would be willing to sign up for.
And that's where I keep coming back to communication. Like, if that's communicated and everybody's in agreement on this plan, then, what really is there that's wrong? Because it's not like you've lied to somebody. You've laid it out there, you've put it out there, and then you're given a chance. And let's say he walks in this program, gets in a strength conditioning program, and then takes off after year one. Great. It's good for everyone. But I just don't think that, never handcuff creativity, especially in today's game of college basketball. Be creative. If you can kind of create things and do things and kind of get a leg up and get ahead, and maybe some other schools aren't doing, and it's within the rules of what today is, be creative. And if you can do that, then I think that it kind of goes in, and like, you have so many guys now involved in your program, from support staff to on-court coaching to recruiting to analytics. Like, there's so many areas that you touch now and there's going to be positions too in the next few years, I think, are just going to continue to grow. And I think college basketball staffs are going to continue to need more guys to be involved in the game. Use it. Use all those resources. And if that's what works out, Jack, I think that's a great plan. How many other programs in college basketball would have that? But both sides got to be willing. There cannot be any pushback from either one, or it doesn't work. But like I said, I turn on his tape, and I do see a lot of things that I like that can develop into a very solid player. It's just, do you want to go play somewhere else, or do you want to come to Kentucky and possibly do it and develop in this system, in this strength and conditioning program, and do it at a program where maybe the payoff's not until maybe 3 or 4 years from now? It'd be refreshing to see.
It would. I would just need some type of reassurance that you're not just developing this kid for somebody, pouring your time and resources into a kid who has no intention of kind of seeing the fruits of that labor pay off. That doesn't really sit well with me, but I get it. Like, you can't tie a kid down to a program, because that's today's landscape.
Well, so I'm going to take it another way with you here. Is North Florida going to feel the same way about Chaz Lanier if, after he just had a breakout there, and then he comes to Kentucky and then does it at Kentucky? Because that's a guy that has been in that program, but he paid it off there, but now he's kind of putting himself in a situation. So
I guess the counter to that is, he at least got the shot to prove that he was Chaz Lanier at that point, to kind of have the breakthrough. The thing that would set right with me is, we develop him for 3 years. It's going to finally be his time or whatever. And he says, I'm hitting the portal. Maybe he's playing 5, 7, 10 minutes a game as a sophomore, redshirt sophomore. And then going into his 4th year of college, says, I'm going to hit the portal. I showed just enough flashes elsewhere that there's a huge NIL bag waiting for me, and I'm going to go elsewhere and then become a star elsewhere. It's just like, man, what are we doing? Like, that would be just a worst case scenario, to the point where I would go, that was a waste of our time, beyond having just another practice body, beyond having just another depth piece in case of injury, break the glass in case of emergency type guy. That's the only argument that I have. But I'm using Jamie as a big picture example. I like Jamie. I would be okay with taking his commitment, but you're entering interesting territory where I would personally keep it open just in case. So, the reclasses in July after Peach Jam, there are always 4 guys that make the jump. What about second semester January kid? What about the next big Z? Whatever.
Now that's a fair point. Like that to me is where probably the argument lies a lot. Is there that late summer guy that can come in and impact that's ahead? I just think that in today's NIL era of college basketball and the transfer portal, you get those situations like an Ugo, who was a reclass that comes in and was maybe kind of forced into a secondary role or a reserve role behind Oscar Tshiebwe, but just wasn't ready for it. So then you're still leaning Lance Ware, but then at the end of the year, you lose Lance, and then you fast forward and you've lost another one. You lose Ugo. So like this cycle, whether it's a reclass or it's a guy from a small program, I guess my thing with a guy like Vincent is if he goes to somewhere else and gets that opportunity, who's to say he's not in the portal 3 years from now and you're ready to take him then? So there's no right or wrong with any of this. It's just you kind of just hope that those sticky areas of this, you just hope that you kind of fall on the good side of it and not the bad side of it, because that small percentage of things where you've got a way that you want to do things now, but there's still always going to be those areas, maybe those gray areas of this where you're kind of just like, let's take a chance here and do this. And maybe the next year, like, okay, let's try this, because that's the area that nothing ever really sticks and gets consistent. But what you brought up, though, that's an interesting side of this, though. And if you can add a guy as a practice body that can, one, get better against the competition you have, but also make the guys that you have even better, that's a significant step up when it comes to walk-ons. And you give the NIL approach to it as well. Maybe it's something you can sell, moving forward in your program. But
maybe make Jamie Vincent a preferred walk-on, penciling him in for a scholarship, and then but if a can't miss opportunity presents itself, I hope you understand we gotta move forward with it. We want to take you, and we'll take care of you no matter what. But hope you understand. Like, if the plan's to redshirt him anyway, what difference does it make as long as his tuition's paid for and his room and board and all that? So it's tricky. I look at it and say, why not just push for Jasper Johnson to reclass? Why not just go all in and say, at least he has ties to Kentucky. He wants to stay in 2025 to help develop his body. Why not just say, hey, we'll definitely take care, you'll be taken care of NIL wise with the in-state Kentucky pitch and all of that. You'll be fine. And we'll still keep you on your development plan, your 2-year development plan for next season, as you already planned. Like, that guy is already one that's planning on being in college next season. Why not do that? So it's interesting. You're in a tricky predicament that I don't envy, because you don't want to be the school that also passed up on Jamie Vincent and he becomes a superstar either. Like, that's the one thing that, on the flip side, that you don't want to have him on campus for a visit and then pass because you said, we're going to have you on a fifth year plan. And then by year 2, he's an all conference type of talent.
And that's what I was kind of leaning in on. Like, you let him go do this plan or something somewhere else, then you may pay for it on the other side of this. But there's a lot of, like, this is all new to us. Like, everything about this roster construction and how it's going, it's all new. Like, it's all uncharted waters for us that follow this program and have worked in it, and the people in this chat that are fans of it. It is different. And this is kind of the first checkpoint for us of putting this roster together. There's a roster in place in Lexington that you can look at that has multiple names that you probably can expect to be pulling for a year from now into coming back. It also has those couple of guys, Jack, that maybe they outperform expectations and they leave after a year, but that's good for everybody. So I'm not comparing teams and how good they can be here. But when it comes to maybe something that we're going to look at and we keep it. And we'll wrap up here. I know we're going way over, but look, we've only done one episode a week. Like, we're giving people a little bit of extra here. So when it comes down to roster construction and what these rosters look like, I've had a lot of people ask me, like, well, are these rosters going to look similar to Tubby Smith's days, where you have a combination of guys that reach junior and senior year, but then you have some really elite players that end up going and playing in the NBA? Well, that's 20 years ago. Like, it's entirely different. But one team, I kept bringing up like 2004 Kentucky that lost to UAB as a 1 seed. When you look at that team on paper, they didn't have a ton of dudes that went on and had a lot of success in the NBA, but they had really, really good college basketball players that were in a system for a long time and developed within that system. That's kind of the way that I've maybe compared it to what some rosters could look like. You could have guys that are just very, very, very good college basketball players. Like that team, like those guys were Gerald Fitch, Eric Daniels, Cliff Hawkins. Of those guys, all 3 of them had great careers at Kentucky. You still had Chuck Hayes, Glenn Azabuki. Like, you had names that you knew within your program. Now, those were guys that you recruited out of high school that developed. So maybe that's the difference now. But just from a standpoint of maybe there's not that star on your roster, the system itself can still be strong if all the parts of it are working. Those teams were really good defensively, and they did some really good things offensively, and they showed up where it mattered on KenPom. Is that kind of the blend that maybe we see? Now, I don't want anybody talking about that I'm trying to compare this current team to that team, but just from a roles perspective, that they have guys that I thought ended up being better basketball players because of the guys that they played with in the system they played in, that if you take 1 or 2 out, I don't think Eric Daniels has the career at Kentucky that he had. I don't think Gerald Fitch has the numbers that he had at Kentucky. Like, those things is what I'm looking for, that everybody's kind of better because of the overall product. That's where I see maybe this roster kind of leaning and going.
We'll see. It's going to be a wild ride. It has been up to this point. We'll continue to be. It's going to be an interesting couple of days. We'll obviously do a follow up for whatever happens with Chaz here in the next couple of days. We'll do a follow up episode then to just kind of break down what happened, where Kentucky goes from here. We'll see. Hopefully,
someone wants to know what I'm always looking down at when you're talking. It's notes. I've always got notes and where I'm going. I'm hearing Jack, but it's always my notes.
It's all good.
And it's the chat, because I want to see what people are saying so we can engage there too.
We'll hopefully by, if Chaz commits, we'll obviously just do a commitment episode, and we'll go from there to see about what it means and what comes next after that. We'll obviously have some clarity with Jamie Vincent as well after that. And if you strike out on Chaz, then it's all in on Jaxson Robinson from there. We'll follow along with the last couple of days of his draft journey, see where things go from there. But it's going to be an exciting couple of days, exciting several weeks. Peach Jam's right around the corner. Recruiting is going to continue to ramp up. We now have a base. We have a following of what the heck they're doing and what that's going to look like. So plenty of exciting stuff moving forward. We are looking forward to it, and we're excited to you want to break that news that we're going to be hosting KSR in June 14th. We'll be June 14th. We have we have been tentatively penciled in for KSR. Very excited, very grateful for that opportunity. As always, appreciate Matt for extending the invite. The absolute best opportunity in the world. So we're just so grateful for it, and hopefully fans are excited for that and you're going to tune in with us. So we will be back hopefully in the next couple of days with good news, and we'll just kind of navigate those waters from there. We'll see you then. Maybe.